that was a very heartfelt prayer. Appreciate that. Also, meron ding reminder lang sa bagong mga nakalagay. Mayroon tayong garage din, ano? Din sa ating garahe. In fact, 80% po yung mga sasakyan na dyan ngayon. So, take advantage po. Tatanungin ko po kayo, ano sa tingin niyo sa mga Kristiyano ang pinaka-popular na verse? John 3:16, which is, for God so loved the world. Kung tatanungin ko rin po kayo kung ano yun sa palagay niyo ang pinaka-popular na verse in the Bible for non-Christians. For non-Christians. So, it is actually the verse in Matthew 7 verse 1, which is, judge not. We hear this a lot. In fact, more than once, narinig ko sa TV, I believe people who actually don't go to church as much, who don't go to church probably at all, and this is very popular thing that they're saying, judge not. And that actually, whether they know it or not, is actually coming from the Bible. And sa atin din, this is a thing that we know very well. This verse is something we know very well. But at the same time, it's hard to understand. Hindi ko yan madaling intindihin as we will go through it, because when you say judge not, what do we mean by the word judge? Okay. In another context, Western culture po natin, including the Philippines, what they are trying to say and what we are getting from that kind of a statement, or judge not, is simply saying that we want tolerance. Diba, the word tolerance is something that's very, very popular. In fact, it is something that's very attractive. Okay? Tolerance and broad-mindedness. So tolerance can simply be defined as acceptance of people as they are, irrespective of their skin color, culture, beliefs, and religions. It also means acceptance of different opinions and viewpoints, without having to resort to violence if those opinions don't necessarily agree with ours. So when we come to think about it, but by the word itself, there's nothing wrong with tolerance, which judge that is actually trying to come from, except that as Christians, we have sort of lost what it really means to be tolerant and to be non-judgmental. When we say judge not, or when we say we ought to be tolerant, to what degree do we mean we should not be judging? And what do we mean exactly to be tolerant? Are we to be tolerant with everything that is happening, or there is a kind of a limit to tolerance, a limit to judging? So this is what I will be trying to expound, and I think this is what we will see in the verses that we will cover. So we cannot tolerate destructive and irresponsible behavior, for example. That's why we have laws. That's why we have rules. Whether you are in school, whether you're in an office setting, whether you are on the streets, diba meron tayong law against driving under the influence. We have several laws because we want to make sure that the people are protected from irresponsible behavior. So yes, we can be tolerant, but there are things that we should not be tolerant about. In some cases, for example, we know people who have problems with drinking, and if you are in that kind of a situation and you allow that to happen, to continue, you may be thinking of yourself as a tolerant person, but actually you are not supposed to be in that type of an attitude because it perpetrates that kind of behavior that is so destructive to the person as well as to the people around. So this is something that we will be looking at. How then are we to understand the command of Jesus when he said in Matthew 7 that we do not judge, or you too will be judged? Is he asking us to be totally tolerant and non-judgmental, totally accepting, or is there something more to this? And so this will be our topic for the sermon today. So let's read now Matthew 7. Read with me verse 1. Starting with verse 1 up to verse 5. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Will measure to you. Verse 3. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? The next slide. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Let me just explain a little bit about what the word judge is in Greek. We have that in the next verse. It says krino, okay? Yan yung root word ng judge. And when you understand what that is, it's broad. It has so many meanings. And one of which, of course, is in the legal terms to judge a case or to decide if someone is guilty for a crime or not. So that is judge, okay? You judge that. And our judges know exactly, that's exactly what we're doing. But it also simply means to separate, okay? You sort of distinguish one from the other. When you're distinguishing one from the other, alin bang kulay blue, alin bang kulay red, alin bang mas masarap, alin bang ayaw nyo when you are eating, for example, that is also judging. So, it means to separate, to select, to choose, diba? Kung minsan bibili ko tayo ng karne, inaampihan pa natin, ganon. Kasi you're trying to judge what is good and what is not. So you are selecting. So the word krino all means these words. Form an opinion. Kahit sa opinion, you're already judging. Okay? So it simply means that when you have an opinion about whether this car that you like to buy is the right car over the other one, you are actually judging. And to criticize is also a form of judging. And then, of course, nasabi ko na to decide, to rule, punish, or condemn. I think when we look at our chapter or our passage, the word condemn seems to be closest. Okay? So we say judge, in other words, do not condemn or condemn not. But just to let you know that these are all the varied meanings of the word krino. Just take note of that because we will get back to that word again as we go through the passage. So I will now have at least 5 points from this passage, and we'll go through it, and then so that we will understand it better. Let's go back to verse 1, please. Go back. Okay. So do not judge, or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. When we judge, we lay down a standard, a criteria by which we measure the worth or character of a person. So, in effect, what we are doing is, what Jesus Christ is trying to say is, when you judge a person, when you decide about the character of the person, when you think or have an opinion of the worth of the person, you have to make sure that that standard is something that you are willing to go and have the same of. Okay? So that's what it says. When we judge, we have a criteria. And that criteria should not only apply to the other person, but it should apply to us. The passage is not saying we should not judge at all. Okay? In fact, there are many other verses in the Bible, I just don't have time to enumerate them, in which the word judge is used. In other words, we can judge. There's a passage that says, are we going to judge the angels? Paul says that. So the passage is not saying we should not judge at all. Rather, we should judge with the same standard God uses in judging us, and not short of that. Not to be condemning, but forgiving, because that's the way God judges us. Not to tolerate evil behavior, because God doesn't allow that, but to allow change of behavior by creating the emotional and social environment by which change can happen. So when we judge, we have to be thinking of the way God deals with us, and in that same manner, that same criteria should be the way we should judge others. If we cannot do that, then we should not judge at all. Okay? Remember the woman that is caught in adultery, and the chief priests, I think the Pharisees, brought her to Jesus Christ to be judged by Jesus Christ, and they know she was guilty. Okay, and what did Jesus do? She just wrote something sa ground. Maybe, sabi ng ibang commentators, it was the sins of those who accused the woman. And isa sila nawala. Diba? So, how did Jesus Christ judge the woman? Did he approve of her adultery? No. But he judged her by what? By being merciful, by being forgiving. And with the simple instruction to say, I condemn you not, I judge you not, go and sin no more. So unless we can do that in our judging, then we should not judge. And that is the next slide, forward na po. Unless, judge not, unless you judge by God's standard of patience, forgiveness, and love. We'll now go to the next point. I will just read the verse. Verse 3 says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust, which is very, very tiny, in your brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank? Ang plank po ay beam. Kung nakakita na po kayo ng poste, ganun po yung ibig sabihin ng beam. That is in your own eye. How can you say to your brother, let me take a speck out of your own eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? So, the verse is not saying we are incapable of judging correctly or righteously. That's not what it is saying. We can be judging correctly or righteously. It is saying we are pretty much incapable, okay, of judging righteously and correctly all the time. In other words, as we are capable of judging correctly and righteously, it doesn't happen all the time. We are pretty much capable also of judging blindly and erroneously. Why? Because of our spiritual blindness. Because of our pride. That is why hindi natin nakikita. One very interesting illustration that I will give you. I don't know if you sa YouTube, I think sa Facebook, there was this little boy, and there was an older person. They sat in front, and then they were pretending like driving a driving, may plato yung tatay, may plato yung bata, they face each other. So, kung anong gagawin ng tatay, gagawin din ng bata. Pag gumana siya, and then yung tatay, nilagyan niya ng uling yung plato. Hindi niya nakikita. And then, kung anong gagawin ng tatay, magpupuna siya, magpupunas din yung bata. And then, for a while, tumatawa rin mga kasama nila. Kasi kung ano nung nangyari sa mukha ng bata na hindi niya nakikita. Okay? So it was meant to be a funny thing, very embarrassing sa bata. But my point there is, you can see almost all parts of your body. Okay? To a certain extent, you can see part of your back. Okay? But your face, you cannot see. So, we need to be aware of that, and we need to be very careful. Kasi yung pinagmumukha natin sa ibang mga tao, yun pa hindi natin nakikita mismo. So it is very revealing na kung tayo po ay merong like muta or anything, diba? We need people to tell us that. Kung meron tayong flaw, we need people to tell us that. Kung minsan, di alam ng tao na kung minsan mapula na yung mata niya. Uy, bakit mapula yung mukha mo? Ay, mata mo. Ay, di ko alam. Yung pala, meron nangyari sa kanyang mata. So, I think what we need to realize is we oftentimes can be judging blindly and erroneously. Because that's the way things are. We cannot see our own faces. So my point here is that judge not unless you judge with humility and truth. In other words, nakikita mo talaga kung sino ka. And with a great degree of humility. Let me read to you an illustration here. It was F.B. Mayer, I believe, who once said that when we see a brother or sister in sin, there are two things we do not know. First, we do not know how hard he or she tried not to sin. And second, we do not know the power of the forces that assailed him or her. We also do not know what we would have done in the same circumstances. So, isn't that very interesting that it's so easy for us to judge another person that they're doing this, they don't deserve this, and all that. But we never know exactly what the person has gone through. And chances are, if we are in the same situation also, we would probably be doing exactly the same thing, which we are judging a person. So next point now, verse 5, this is just two words. Verse 5, it says, "You hypocrite." What the passage is not saying is that we should not make any judgments at all. Rather, it is telling us to avoid a certain way, a certain manner of judging, which is hypocritical. In fact, hypocrisy seems to be the main issue of the whole passage. The reason why Jesus Christ says, "Judge not," is if we have hypocrisy in our hearts. We are not able to judge if we are hypocrites. So, hypocrisy can be defined as the practice of claiming to have moral standards or beliefs to which one's own behavior does not conform or does not conform. In other words, we are pretending. It's pretense. So we say, we are like this. In public, we say that. But in private, we are so different. I mean, you know what I mean. There are so many people who are like that. They say we are like this, but in their real lives, they are not. In Greek, the word hypocrisy comes from the word hypo, which is under, and krino, the same word that we had earlier, which we know is to judge. In other words, a judging under, or a performer acting under a mask. So it's not the real person. It's just an actor under a disguise. So a hypocrite is someone who's not the real person, who is showing a mask, who is not genuine. Sa ating vernacular, we call it doble cara. Okay? So that's what it means. Your profession does not match your practice. And so, you hypocrite is a very important word that Jesus uses. In fact, it's very, very strong in order to dissuade his followers not to judge with a double face. Not to judge when you are not genuinely what you are representing. So, the next verse, the next slide, it simply means, judge not, unless you judge without pretense and personal bias. Judge not unless you judge without pretense and personal bias. Continuing verse 5 now, after saying you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Now this passage, again, this verse, is not saying we cannot judge others. It is saying we ought to judge ourselves first before we judge others. We have to look at our hearts first before we look at the motives of other people. And that is not easy to do, because the natural tendency of people is to jump at others, concentrate on others, focus on others, rarely looking at themselves. And Jesus Christ is saying here, we need to be honest about who we really are. We need to be honest, even to see the darkest parts of who we are. And we need to expose that before God. Unless we do self-examination, we are not capable of judging. Unless we are able to honestly look at ourselves, see our strengths along with our weaknesses, and see where our judging can come in, we are not able judges. For example, for those who are teachers, when we correct a test paper, we use a test guide. Or a guide, parang yung, what do you call that? It's a answer key. Diba? Yeah. That has all the correct answers. So what we do is we use that as a standard, okay, and correct papers accordingly. Kung hindi yun ang sagot dito sa answer key, we mark it wrong. If it's the same, we just correct it. Similarly, when we Christians examine ourselves, we of necessity need to compare ourselves with a certain answer key or with a certain standard. And that standard is no other than Jesus Christ himself. If we are honest to ourselves, we can never fully measure up. It doesn't mean, however, that we should never try to be like Christ, because as Christ said, be you holy as God is holy. Christianity is a process by which the character of Christ slowly becomes our own by the power of the Holy Spirit. We are transformed to become like Him in our thoughts and actions, and therefore, when this transformation happens, we can rightly judge. So, My next slide, judge not unless you judge and examine yourselves first, or ourselves first. Okay? Let me also just quote from Luke 6, verse 37. I'm not sure if I have that. Yeah, it's there. It's a parallel passage of Matthew 7. It says, do not judge, or this one is Jesus again speaking, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. So what I find very interesting here is that the judging, the condemnation that we are warned against, pinasok ni Jesus Christ in the word, forgive, and you will be forgiven. So forgiveness is tied in with the concept of judging. We judge, but knowing behind us that there is a need to forgive more than we need to condemn. Jesus is not saying we should not judge as to determine what is right or wrong, because we can see what is right and what is wrong in the behaviors of others. It is saying that we should not judge with a condemnatory attitude to prove that the others are wrong. Isn't it interesting that it is so easy to prove other person's opinions as wrong more than to prove yourself right? Mas madali kasing tumingin sa, alam niyo yung sinasabi, when you look at a black wall, white, newly painted wall, tapos may nakitang langaw doon, napakadaling spot, diba? Ang napakalit na langaw sa against a white background. Just like that, we tend to concentrate on yung langaw rather than appreciating the fact that the wall is white. And sometimes kung may stain yan or nahawakan isang bata na marunong kamay, we are so disturbed by seeing a handprint of a child on the very white wall, forgetting that the white paint na napakaganda, but also forgetting that the wall itself exists. We forget the wall itself. We can see the handprint, dirty handprint, but we forget about the wall. Which one is more important? The handprint, or the paint, or the wall? Ganun din eh. Minsan sa tao, napakadali natin makita yung kamalian ng tao, forgetting the worth of the person. We concentrate on the mistakes. We can think of one mistake and then, maalala natin yung other mistakes that person had done in the past, forgetting about that person. Forgetting about the good things that the person had done. Right? We certainly can judge actions and behaviors. However, we need to be careful that we do not jump to conclusions too quickly on the motives from which these actions and behaviors may come from. We can judge actions, but we cannot judge motives that we do not know. Sometimes understanding the reason for the behavior makes one become more accepting and forgiving of the behavior. We must learn not to impute wrong motives as if we know exactly what a person is thinking or maybe going through. We have to beware of our tendency to be self-righteous. Remember the story of the woman who gave an offering and she gave all that she had and got 1 penny? From the external looks of things, we can say that he gave so less, she gave so less. She's not helping. She's not contributing to the church cause. If that were to happen today, We can judge her by saying so many things. Oh, she gave so little. But Christ can see what's inside. And what did she say? He commended her for she gave of all that she had. She gave of all her living. We do not have the capacity to examine motives all the time, but Christ can. So when we judge, the next slide, we should judge not unless we judge without having any attitude of condemnation. We cannot see what's the motive. We cannot see what the person is going through and what the person is thinking. Now that we go now through some practical applications, before we make any judgment, number one is know the whole story of the person before making judgments. Kung minsan napakahirap po yan. If you're familiar with social media, the internet, all that, there are a lot of information, okay? There's so many information, but hardly depth of information. So when we see issues or about people being talked about on the internet, what we know or what we see on the surface. And people can form all sorts of opinions about that person. They judge the person without necessarily looking at the whole person's story. The reason we need to know the whole story before making judgments is so that we would know exactly what the person's going through. And unless we can know, we should not judge. Okay? Number two, know your own issues and biases. When we judge, it is never outside of who we are. We judge a person because something is irritating us about that person. We are being triggered by that person's behavior, maybe actions, history, whatever. And therefore, we are affected because of our own issues. So when we judge, rarely are we judging independent of ourselves. We are hardly objective in our judgments because of our own personal issues and biases. We need to know what's happening to us. Are we judging because of the action itself? Or are we judging because hindi natin siya kababayan? Ano yun? Sa Pilipino kasi napakalakas yung pagsasama or pagkakaintindihan ng mga magkakabayan. So, simply because kababayan kita, somehow may automatic magnet ba? Na you can actually understand each other. Tapos kung hindi mo naman siya kababayan, there's a wall. There's a barrier. So we need to be aware of those things. In fact, kahit sa mga choices ng mga candidates, whatever, yung pagiging kababayan na napakalaking influence yun on the votes. Okay? Whether it's here in the Philippines or whether it's in other countries, yung pagiging kababayan na. So you judge a person, you select a person, you decide on the person's character based on what? Kababayan ko. So, is yung pagiging kababayan ba the same as qualifications for an office? Hardly. But because of our own personal biases that happen. So we need to be careful about that. Why do we hate or criticize someone so easily? We need to think about that. Or why do we like somebody so easily? Mahilang basta maganda siya, may tsura. Napakadali eh. But we need to be careful when it comes to judging that those things are taken care of. Lastly, in terms of our application, know when to say, I don't know. Pag meron po tayong mga things to decide on, at least sa mga meetings na na-attendihan ko na po, rarely do we say, I don't know. All of us have opinions. All of us have something to say. All of us have something to present to the table. But rarely do we examine ourselves and say, wait, I don't think I know much about this. Therefore, I'm not going to decide. I'm not going to say I know. I'm not going to judge. So when we don't know, it's better not to judge. Or know when to say, I don't know. That is actually a very good way of checking ourselves. We need not always know everything because we can't know everything. It is not weakness to admit when you don't know something. We should not judge what we do not know, especially when that refers to another person. So it is all right not to judge until you know. Remember, there's a saying that's very, very popular. Do not judge a book by its. Alam natin yan, diba? Until you read the book, do not judge. Until you read the whole book, can you judge? It's not enough that you just read the introduction, then you say, I know what the book is all about. No, you have to read the whole book. You need to understand the whole book. So do not judge a book by its cover. You really need to read it, understand it, before you can say something about it, whether it's for or against. So, brethren, that's basically the issues that Christ is trying to present to us in this verse. Okay? Judging is a very serious thing. When we judge, we have to think of ourselves as like judges, in which maybe the life of that person is dependent on. We have to judge, knowing that we have responsibilities when we do that. So again, judge not unless you judge by God's standards of patience and love. Judge not unless you judge with humility and truth. Judge not unless you judge and examine yourself first. Judge not unless you judge without pretense and personal bias. And lastly, judge not unless you judge without any attitude of condemnation. And therefore, this is something we need to think about. This is serious. And the word that Jesus Christ used there is, you hypocrite. It's a very, very strong word. Unless we can think of this thoroughly, we are hypocrites. And we don't want that. We don't want to be actors. We want to be the genuine us to people. And we want to make sure that we bring out the best in people. The reason why we don't want to condemn is that person has the same potential that we have in the kingdom. The whole passage of Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is about the kingdom of God. Living in the kingdom of God. Not judging means we would like to welcome all people into the kingdom and not segregate them and not separate them and not to think of ourselves as more superior than them. So judge not means we want to include people. We want to be forgiving. We want them to be a part of the kingdom. And so let me lead you in a simple prayer. Let's bow down our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, as we conclude our message for today, we thank you for what you have shown us by the words of Jesus Christ on the area of judging. We know, Father, that you have given us minds. We can decide on things. You have taught us right things and wrong things. But we also recognize, Father, our weaknesses and that sometimes we do not see things as clearly as we ought. We pray now, Father, then for your Holy Spirit to unblind our eyes, to take away the scales,
that might make us not see clearly. Help us to value each individual as they are, created human beings as we are, with the same potential, with the same desires, with the same yearnings for a life that is worth living. Help us not to ignore the sufferings of other people, what they may be going through, the difficulties, the pains that we often forget because we can judge too quickly and with such a condemnatory attitude. Give us humility then, Lord, as Jesus Christ has died on the cross to save people and took the judgment of sin on himself. Help us to appreciate that, Lord, and maybe take on a little bit of judgment, of being forgiving towards other people, to take on their pain and be honest instead. Help us to be loving, to be humble always, Lord. And so we will not judge by appearance only, but we will judge correctly by the standards of Jesus Christ. So Lord, help us pattern our lives according to your will, according to the life of Jesus Christ. Help us not to judge wrongly, but help us to be judged correctly, guided by your Holy Spirit. This we sincerely pray in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.